This podcast is a production of Queens Public Television in New York City. Visit us on the web at qptv.org.
Hey, I'm Mark Bassino, and this is Queens Creative. Hey, welcome to the Queens Creative Podcast, coming to you from the lovely studios of Queens Public Television in New York City. Oh, we're going to have fun on this episode of Queens Creative because today my guest is the fabulous comedian, actor, radio personality, podcast host, and beautiful all-around human being, Rob Bartlett. Rob is really an entertainer's entertainer in the truest and old-school sense of the term. As a man of many talents, Rob can and has done practically all there is to do in show business and continues to do so. Widely known for his 30-plus year run as a regular writer and performer on the Imus in the Morning program, Rob is also a very funny stand-up comedian as well as an accomplished Broadway, television, Emmy, and Drama Desk award-winning actor. Over the years, Mr. Bartlett has worked with the likes of Eddie Murphy, Nathan Lane, Matthew Broderick, Christina Applegate, Daniel Radcliffe, David Letterman, Conan O'Brien, Lucy Liu, and the list goes on and on and on. And if all of the aforementioned wasn't enough, Rob is also a philanthropist. As an advocate, fundraiser, board member, and trustee of the Long Island Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. On today's pod, Rob and I have a few laughs, talk about his beginnings in comedy, right on through to his latest projects and everything in between that's made for a long, varied, and incredible career in that crazy world they call showbiz. All right, this is going to be super fun. We'll get into my talk with Rob in just a minute, but before we do, please check out this message from QPTV.
The Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment has brought Broadway and the Boroughs here to Queens, here in Jackson Heights, and we were particularly excited about this particular performance because it's World Pride. New York City is the first U.S. city to host World Pride, and it's the 50th anniversary of Stonewall, and we're at the site of the start of the Pride Parade here in Queens to present excerpts from the prom and Be More Chill. We wanted to make sure that everyone has access to Broadway in some way, shape, or form. Some of the people that are here are probably Broadway fans that follow the shows, but then it might also be some cases where it's the first opportunity people have had a chance to see a Broadway performance. And so we just want to make sure that this rich cultural resource is available to all of the residents of New York City.
Her range needs expanding, her edges need sanding.
Don't miss Around Queens, Broadway in the Boroughs, and many other programs. You can watch them all on our website, qptv.org.
Hey, welcome back to Queens Creative. As promised before the break, let's get right to it and jump into my conversation with the amazing Mr. Rob Bartlett. So Rob Bartlett, welcome to the podcast and Queens Public Television. Thanks so much for coming down and doing this, man.
My pleasure.
I really appreciate it. I thought we would start at the beginning, which would be a good place to start, right? The beginning.
It tends to, unless it's a, one of those movies where they play it backwards.
Right. No, I don't think that's the case here. I'm pretty sure. Anyway, so I was thinking, let's start all the way at the top for you. Mm-hmm. You're a New Yorker, born in Brooklyn, raised in Long Island, lived in Queens after that. It seems like a lot of great comedians come from Queens and Long Island, I was thinking, like Jerry Seinfeld, Billy Crystal, Eddie Murphy, yourself. Why do you think these places are such a sort of fertile breeding ground for comedic talent? I was kind of thinking about that, and I wanted to get your take on it.
I think it's something in the water. I think there's definitely something in the water. It has to be. I mean, Jerry and I are from the same town, actually, from Massapequa. So,
oh, wow.
So, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that it's the suburbs, and especially for our generation, we grew up, kind of like baby boomers. And I think that our perspective was shaped by that, by the fact that the environment we were in, because most people I know weren't born on Long Island. They were born in either Brooklyn or Queens, and they just migrated east.
Right.
Yep. If you were born in Queens, you kind of settled on the North Shore. If you were born in Brooklyn, you settled on the South Shore, and it was like the big exodus from the boroughs. And I think that has a lot to do with it. Long Island was a great place to grow up. The school systems were great. There were integrated communities. I mean, it seemed like it was a perfect place. And I think that the perspective that you had, having kind of the best of both worlds, because, you were literally 30 minutes from the city. So
you're close to the city. You're close to the ocean.
You have museums. You have Broadway. You have, just about every kind of restaurant you want. And then you go home and go to the beach, like you said. It's just it was the perfect place to grow up, I think, and I think our perspective comes from that because we had it relatively easy. Okay, we were able to sit back and basically make judgments on society, which, and we all wanted to be the center of attention. Okay. So I think that had a lot to do with it as well.
I gotcha. Okay, well, along those lines, I was thinking, so how does little Robbio sort of growing up, how do you get the comedy bug? Like, how does that happen?
My father was a huge fan of comedy, and he had all of Bill Cosby's records.
Cool.
And my father had the greatest laugh ever, and I learned early on that making him laugh was my key to happiness. Okay. As long as I could make him laugh, I was good to go.
You're good.
He had listened. He had, I guess, a friend of his had loaned him Pat Cooper's.
Pat Cooper.
I don't remember which. Our hero, Pat Cooper, and it was the Italian wedding bit that Pat Cooper did.
Okay.
Which is just brilliant. And later on, I got to work with Pat. We did a show together called Rant and Rave, and just a genius in terms of the way he works a crowd. And my father laughed until, tears were streaming down his face. So I was in kindergarten.
Right.
And I kind of took what I remembered of it, and I actually imitated it in kindergarten the next day.
Right.
And I made Ida Green, who was the girl I had a crush on, I made her laugh.
Ida Green, there you go.
PS 208, my first romance, I actually, I made her laugh and I was good. So it kind of started from there, really.
It's like the equivalent of a guy being in the band in high school.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
You made her laugh.
Right.
And that's
right.
Wow, interesting. Have you ever seen Ida Green again?
No. Matter of fact, I don't think I even saw her after kindergarten, to be honest with you. But I made her laugh, but, it was very fleeting.
She doesn't know what she kicked off.
This is true. This is true.
It's interesting.
A lifetime of heartache is what she left.
Oh, man. Well, you see, I'm happy that she did that, though, because what she did made the world laugh after that.
Started the wheel turning. And then, most comics, most comedians wanted the attention, wanted the approval. And when they couldn't get it traditional ways, they would, be the class clown, or they would do something stupid. And that's, how we learned to cope.
I gotcha. Yeah, no, that makes sense. That totally makes sense. Again, sort of along those lines, sort of moving a little further, I've heard the story when you got started as a comedian down the line a little bit from your grade school days down the line. Mm-hmm. You teamed up with none other than Eddie Murphy. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm sure you've been asked this question a million times, but how did you come to meet and work with Eddie? Now, the sketch improvisational trio was called the Identical Triplets.
The Identical Triplets. It was myself, Eddie, and Bob Nelson.
Oh, and Bob Nelson's here. Okay.
And we were just friends. We all got our start at a place called Richard M. Dixon's White House Inn, which was in Hicksville.
Okay.
On Hicksville Road, in Massapequa. So it was, in my town. So I could not go there.
Right.
And when I decided that I wanted to try doing stand-up, there were, the showcase rooms in the city, Catch a Rising Star, the Improv, Comic Strip, but this was Long Island. Right. And so they had a Wednesday night showcase, and I went down, and I don't know how many comics and singers were on the bill. It might have been 30. Okay. I know that there were more people going on than were in the audience. That much I remember. It was like this little, kind of like house/restaurant that Dick Dixon, who was the presidential lookalike.
Okay.
When Watergate happened, he was hot for about 20 minutes, and then he had to find another gig, because he was an actor.
Okay.
So he decided to do that because he could have a bar and, have food and then free entertainment because they didn't pay you. You just got the free stage
Some
time.
things never change.
Exactly. Well, exactly. And so, it started there and eventually it kind of caught on and they were packing out the house and I befriended Bobby Nelson, and then Eddie came in one night and he was 17, I think. He was still in high school. And he went on stage and did 3 or 4 little snippets of original material, and then it was like a tribute to Richard Pryor.
Oh, wow.
But I knew the moment I saw him that he was going to be huge. There was just something about him. He had that it factor,
right?
And he had the most incredible confidence of anyone I'd ever met in my entire life. And he knew how to work a crowd. He knew how to make people laugh. And we all kind of palled around enough when we made each other laugh. So we'd go out. We would vow we wouldn't go to Dixon's. We're not going to go to Dixon's again tonight. We're going to go do something. We're going to go bowling. We're going to go to the movies. Couldn't get into the movies and couldn't get a lane of bowling, so we wound up back at Dixon's. So we started doing improv with each other, and it just worked. There was chemistry there. Wow. And so we decided, why don't we try to do this? We can each do little snippets of our own individual acts, and then we'll do like these little sketchy things in between.
Right.
And that's how that started.
Wow.
And it was really just to work with people who you really liked,
Yeah, that's a big thing. You really, you want to like the people you're
right.
Play, and I think it shows, on stage when you don't want to be working with a bunch of people you can't stand.
No, exactly. We had a lot of fun though.
Right. That's great. So he was. You felt like he was almost fully formed when you.
Pretty much.
Wow.
I mean, that talent was there. It was, it was just a question of the timing and getting in the right place at the right time. And we were doing the Fort Lauderdale comics. Just after the triplets kind of went their separate ways because places didn't want to book trios, especially on the road, because it would be 3 airfares and 3 hotel rooms.
Right.
So kind of doing our separate acts again. So he and I were working the comic strip in Fort Lauderdale. And the night before, I had been in Manhattan. Merv Griffin was taping some shows at Lincoln Center. He was doing, a week of shows from New York. And Bobby was slated to go on. He had signed with APA, the agency, and they got him this gig in Merv Griffin. And we're sitting in the green room, and we're waiting. And then, of course, his agent comes in and says, they're not going to get to you being bumped. And then we're just kind of talking, and his agent happens to let slip that they were looking for an African-American actor for SNL, because the guy that they had hired, who was a brilliant street performer by the name of Charlie Barnett, who used to work at Washington Square. Yeah, he was just did these crazy characters, and he was really, he had this rubber face. He was really, really gifted. But they discovered that he was illiterate. He couldn't read scripts.
Oh, man.
So they were kind of at a loss.
Right.
And so next day on the plane, I said to Eddie, they're looking for somebody for Saturday Night Live because Charlie Barnett the plane did not hit the ground before Eddie was on the phone to call Richie Ticket and Bob Wax at the comic strip, because they were the only 2 people he knew who had any kind of clout in show business, the owners of the comic strip, and asked them to get him an audition, and they did. And
wow.
The rest is as they say.
As they say. History.
Yeah.
That is what they say, right?
That is what they say.
Okay.
But I was being nice and letting you say it because it's your show.
Well,
I'm being.
You're
I'm
the
nothing
guest.
if not gracious.
I'm not gracious, but I'm nothing. No, all right. I'm not going to be the comedian here. So after you work with Eddie, and it seems like you sort of jumped full on into stand up, right? I mean, after I've seen you do stand up. It's just great. I got the impression watching you do stand-up that this is really like where your heart's at, sort of your, first sort of true love. What is it about stand-up comedy that, you really, really love?
There's great joy in making people laugh. There's great satisfaction in that. It's. I mean, I don't want to make it bigger than it really is, but you're almost providing a public service in that you're giving people a chance to kind of forget what's going on, in their lives or in the world or whatever for the 20 minutes that you're on stage, and just make them genuinely laugh.
Right.
Of course, the other side of that is when you play just silence, which I've done more than once.
Right.
But there's something about that, and being on a stage, you're in control. It's a very, very different thing than acting when there are other people on stage with you, and you got to have to throw the ball back and forth, and you have a common goal, and it's a group thing, and you're all working off each other and interacting. Right. But there's there's great power in that. So it's. When you're on stage and you have the microphone and the lights on you, you're the most important thing in the room.
Right.
And that's how every comic gets their start, is that need, that thing to want to be the center of attention.
Like you referenced before. This is same thing. It's
right.
Just,
getting up at Thanksgiving and, getting dizzy for grandma. It's one of those.
Right. It's, whether you're in a room with a spotlight on you in front of a microphone, or you're in class trying to impress the girl. It's the center of attention thing, and trying to make people laugh, and that's great, man. It's so I wanted to also talk about one of the other big things in your life. You had an incredible run on the Imus in the Morning program.
Yeah,
both sort of the radio and television iterations. You were on the show for, what was it, like over 30 years?
Yeah, 31, I think. 31,
wow.
32.
So how did that gig come about for you? I mean, it's fascinating, your career, all the different levels.
It's so funny. I was thinking about this a couple of months ago. I was thinking about all the things that I've done in the course of my career, and all the things that I'm still doing and hope to do.
Right.
It kind of runs the gamut, It really does. It's everything from, being on a nationally syndicated radio show with one of the people who invented
the whole shock jock
idea.
Thing, right.
And then 20 years later, one of the hosts on the WWF Monday Night Raw.
Right.
It's like, just one of these things is not like the other.
Right.
So I had been a fan of Imus's.
Okay.
And in high school, I had a clock radio that I won because I was the head of my homeroom, and we sold more magazines than any other homeroom. So I got to choose a prize, and I chose it was an AM clock radio. Okay. And I would set it to go to school, and I set it to Imus because, he was funny.
Yeah.
I remember, going off and hearing him, coming out of records, don't let the sun go down on me. And he made some comment about, well, how about your daughter? And then they would segue into a commercial, and then he'd come back, they'd be playing tape, from another show.
Right.
So fast forward, I guess, a number of years. I'm doing a one-nighter in Jersey. There were myriad one-nighters at ground rounds and whatnot.
Right.
And with a pal of mine, Mark Sheff, who happened to be Imus's producer at the time. Wow. I was doing a benefit here at, in Queens, in Bayside, at the old Jimmy's Comedy Alley.
Yes, I remember it well.
Bell Boulevard.
Yes.
We were doing a benefit for Make-A-Wish, or one of those children's charities. And I had been working with Soupy Sales on and off.
Wow.
I did a few shows with him at the Bottom Line. Alan Pepper, the guy who owned
the Bottom Line.
The Bottom Line had this idea to get a bunch of guys, comics, do little snippets of their act and tell jokes, and then there'd be an intermission. During the intermission, they'd hand out cards, and people would write down topics for jokes. Okay. And then Soupy, who would MC, would say, okay, who's got a doctor joke? And everyone would have to get up and tell a doctor joke. So it was great. I got to work with, all these great old time guys, with Jan Murray, and,
Wow.
So Soupy at the time was on NBC. It was Imus, Soupy, Howard, and I think Wolfman Jack were the four guys who were on
NBC.
WNBC AM at the time.
AM radio, yeah. I remember it.
Yeah. And but Soupy couldn't have me on for whatever reason to promote this thing. So Mark said, well, why don't you come on Friday? We do comedians on Friday on Imus. I said, sure. So I went in. I it's like, this is a guy who I'd been a fan of. And I did, my signature bit at the time was a Tom Carvel piece. It was a kind of a takeoff on one of those Tom Carvel commercials.
The classic.
Where he'd be interviewing, the store owner. And it's right when the Wednesday is Sunday, buy one, get one free promotion had happened. And my whole thing was this guy this Queens guy, actually, Louis Panabianco, who evolved into Salmonella on the Imus show, was not happy about the idea that he had to give stuff away, And so I played Tom Carvel and the guy, and the wife and the daughter. It was this long thing.
That's great.
I did it for Imus, and he went nuts. He thought it was the funniest thing ever. He said, and anytime you want to come back. And I took him at his word. I would stick my nose in. I'd show up whenever I could. I'd just show up at the studio. And eventually he said, well, why don't you come in after the show and maybe we'll do some bits, do some recorded bits. And I started doing that because that's how I started getting paid, was on a per bit basis.
Oh, I see.
And I would get extra. I made Best of Imus on Saturday.
Oh,
so that was the idea.
That's the impetus to
exactly
really bring it.
I was nailing down maybe $125 a week, which was, it was one gig basically.
That's great.
So, and then when they moved to WFAN, when NBC was sold, they offered me a contract, and I was with them until they went off the air.
Wow, that's amazing, man.
Yeah.
That's 30 years of all the little bits, and I love the Salmonella thing, man.
It was a great place to be, and it afforded me a lot of freedom. He was very, very supportive of me taking off time to do TV, did a couple of pilots, did a couple of episodes, episodic TV, let me take off for a pilot season, let me take off to do certain things on Broadway, very, very supportive, and it was a steady paycheck.
And then you could come back.
And
What could be better?
It was great, and he was just the most supportive.
That's what you want, man. That kind of gig for anybody in the arts, creative, that you can kind of have a launching pad and then have something to jump off from and then come back to, and it's great.
And everything that I learned, just about, not even just about comedy or writing or radio, but just even about the world, current events. I mean, all the things.
It's very topical too, right? I mean,
all the people I was exposed to. Some of my dearest friends I met through the program. I went to see Dick Cavett last night. He's got a documentary on HBO about Muhammad Ali, about when Muhammad Ali used to do the Dick Cavett show all the time. And Dick I met through Imus in the Morning.
Wow.
So
that's right. So many people come through there.
Yeah.
Right. That's amazing, man. That's really it's one of the amazing things about your career. But you've done so many amazing things. I wanted to sort of touch on all of them a little bit as we could, as we go about it. So along those lines, I was thinking, you're not only an amazing comedian, and you've done the radio thing and the television thing with Imus. You're also an accomplished stage actor and a television actor. Now, I wanted to talk about the Broadway stuff first. So, you originated the role of Mr. Mushnick in Little Shop of Horrors, right?
Yes, the Broadway production of Little Shop of Horrors.
You were Speed in The Odd Couple with Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick. You were in Chicago the Musical, Sweet Charity with Christina Applegate, the revival of How to Succeed with Daniel Radcliffe. All amazing stuff. So I started thinking about it. I'm like, how does a stand-up comedian transform into sort of a bona fide stage actor and a musical stage actor at that? Because not many guys do that.
It's it's just a weird way that I back into these things. I had been,
to have the talent to pull it off.
Well, one of the things that I discovered from doing that was I used to think of these people as they were in like this upper level, and it was an unattainable goal. I could never do what they do because there's something special about them. And then I got there and I realized they were all just like me. And so I tried to tell that. As a matter of fact, the middle school in my town is doing Little Shop of Horrors. And I went and I spoke to them all, and I told them, I said, you can do whatever you want. There's no reason why you can't be doing this.
Right.
And I really found that to be true.
That's great.
I had, been a drama club guy in high school, and that was another way that I kind of got the girls, was being the guy I was always the comic relief guy in any of the musicals that we would do. It was Billis in South Pacific, and I was Mr. Applegate in Damn Yankees, and Moonface Martin in Anything Goes, and it was great. And it was a way of, again, doing comedy, but in a different way.
Right.
And I had, studied a little bit. I was an English and theater major in college, and it was one of those things that I always kind of wanted. One of the reasons I got into comedy, to stand up, really, was as a way to get into acting, because I kind of wanted to be an actor. And when I first started, it was when Robin Williams and Steve Martin and all these stand-ups were segueing into TV and film.
Right.
And so I thought, well, this is the easiest way of doing that, because they were offering comics development deals, hand over fist.
That time,
Catch a Rising Star was like, who's the next Robin Williams? Who's the next Steve Martin?
Right. Wow. So I didn't know that. So the acting was sort of the before the comedy, or in tandem with?
It was an offshoot of the comedy, because you start as the class clown, and then you realize that you can actually do this and get the same attention and not get into trouble, because it's legitimate. You're on a stage, and you're actually working hard and rehearsing. But I really enjoyed that, and so I did shows in college and whatnot, and so I was doing the Sands in Vegas. I was one of the last, if not the last, act on the old Sands Hotel in Las Vegas, where the Rat Pack, the same stage where the Rat Pack had played.
That's amazing.
It was really amazing, but it had seen better days. Like the hotel suite they put me up in was like in the back. It was a bungalow, and it still had shag carpeting from when JFK stayed in that suite. So it was like one of those.
You don't want to know what was
No. And while I was there, a producer, a guy by the name of Mitchell Maxwell, who had produced Damn Yankees, the revival with Jerry Lewis on Broadway, was there and knew me from Imus and saw that I was, in the showroom. And he won a ridiculous amount of money at roulette and decided he was going to go see the show. So he was in a good mood.
Great.
And he thought, hey, this guy's really funny. Why don't I stick him in one of my theaters? Because I guess he owned a few theaters, off-Broadway theaters, in one of my theaters, and put a spotlight on the fat guy. So sounded good. So my manager, Gary, and I kind of sat down, and Gary said, it'd be great if you could make it more than just doing your stand-up act.
Right.
So I thought, okay, well, what can I do? So I initially wrote this thing about a comic getting a chance to do a show on Broadway, and all the things he had to go through to have it happen, and then them discovering that they would make more money if I had died than if I actually stayed alive. And so that's how Salmonella was going to be a hitman, and it was kind of like the Producers.
Right, I was going to say it has little producers.
Had a little Producers in it, but it was too convoluted, whatever. And so then I started from scratch, and Mark Waldrop, great director and a great writer, lyricist, said, well, you should write what you know. So I decided, I turned 40. I was having my little midlife crisis and dealing with some father issues, which was there's a reason why I tried to make him laugh.
Right.
And, and he left. And so, I wrote this kind of little play thing around that concept. And I thought, well, it's a suburban. I'll be cleaning out my garage, and then I would use the stuff in the garage to be props in things that kind of like Jonathan Winters used to do.
Right.
One of my idols, Jonathan Winters. So I'd pick up a garden hose and use it as a microphone, whatever it was. So that was the conceit.
Okay.
We did it out of town in Stamford, Connecticut, at the Rich Forum Theater, and it was called Have a Nice Life. And it was about a comic and his wife, and Emily Skinner, the great Broadway actress, played my wife, and it was okay. It got mixed reviews, and then they decided it really needed an overhaul. So they hooked me up with Jack O'Brien, who was a big Broadway director. He did Addams Family, and he did Damn Yankees with Jerry Lewis. Hairspray was also his.
Wow. Okay.
And this is, I predated all this stuff. And so he kind of woodshedded an idea and kind of streamlined it a little bit, and it became More to Love. And Dana Reeve, Christopher Reeve's wife, played my wife. And Joyce Van Patten, who I had a crush on as a kid, played my agent. And it was supposed to be off Broadway. And then all of a sudden, the Eugene O'Neill Theater opened up, and they said, well, let's try it on Broadway. So I opened on Broadway in a show that I wrote and starred in.
It's amazing.
It did 16 previews and 4 performances. And the pull quote from the Times Review was, "Avert your eyes."
Oh, geez.
So it's not the kind of thing you can hang off the marquee to sell tickets.
Right.
So it took a year for me to kind of get over that. And during that time, I did this thing that City Center Encores is a deal that they do every year. They take musicals that haven't been revived for one reason or another. That's how Chicago got its start, the revival of Chicago. And it's very bare bones. It's you're in tuxedos and you hold the scripts because it's an equity thing. You can't really, they do it in 3 weeks. They cast it, rehearse it, and they do shows. Right. So it's like being shot out of a cannon. So they did Golden Boy with Alfonso Ribeiro from Fresh Prince.
Fresh Prince, yeah.
Playing the Sammy Davis Jr. part. And I got this small part because the guy who had cast More to Love, Jay Binder, was casting this thing and said to Walter Bobby, I got a guy who can use. So I went in and I auditioned for Walter Bobby, and I got this small part, Roxy, one of the managers of the fighter. Okay. And got to ad-lib a little thing because you needed some time to fill. They were changing the set, and a big curtain was coming down, and he
what
said,
better than
exactly
comic?
Say something to cover this.
Right.
So it's just this whole thing came. These curtains came down, especially Eddie Sattin's, Park Avenue penthouse, and I took a hold of the curtain and I rubbed it between my fingers, and I went to the other guy who was the other match. Would you look at this verkackte Schmata? And Walter Bobby, who was the director, went nuts. Thought that was the funniest thing ever. So following that, I got called to do an off-Broadway play called Tabletop, which was kind of a dramedy. It was about a commercial director, but the guy who does the product shots. So the guy who shoots, the pizza, right? And the cheese or the beer, being poured into the glass,
right? With a frosty mug.
Yes, exactly. Right. And it was like in a real-time thing, and he had a crunch, and he was a tyrannical director. Okay. And I don't know how, but the playwright, Rob Ackerman, thought that I was embodying the guy who he based it on. Right. Rob had worked for a number of years on a crew of these shoots, and it was the play he wrote was based on that experience. And the New York Times writes a review, and Rob Bartlett is an inspiration. So I kind of got my my back end on that.
Right.
So I'm having lunch with Joyce Van Patten in the city. What's the supermarket that has the cafe above it? I can never remember. Fairway. We're having lunch at Fairway, and Walter Bobby is sitting there, and I know Walter Bobby from doing the city center thing. And so Joyce knew him, and so the three of us sat together and we're talking and chatting and whatever. And then the next day after the next, I get a phone call from my manager. He said, you got an audition for Chicago the Musical. I said, what? He said, yeah, you have to go see the Wednesday matinee, and then after it's over, you have to get up on the stage with the musical director, Bob Billig, and sing Mr. Cellophane. I said,
that's all.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, fine. And I'd seen the show, and it's a terrific show. It's still running, 6 years now. Longest running American musical. And I go. And I was lucky. Brad Garrett was supposed to play the part. He's supposed to play Amos Hart, Mr. Cellophane. But he got the Jackie Gleason TV movie biopic. Right. And so...
And people know him from Raymond.
Everybody loves Raymond.
Right.
And Raymond, who I knew from my acting class, who used to say to the teacher, please don't let Rob go on before me. Don't let me follow Rob. And
it's a great impression.
So Brad Garrett, can't do it. So Walter Bobby's stuck, and I just had lunch when I was fresh in his mind.
Right.
I went down. I get up after the matinee. I sing Cellophane to Bob Billig. On the way home in the car, I get a call. You got the part.
That's fantastic.
And then that led to Little Shop, and that led to
Odd
Couple.
But had you been singing before?
Well, like I said, I'd done musicals when I was in high school, and I had done I was in a Beatle tribute band when I was younger, and as we all were, because comics really want to be musicians.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
The comics want to be musicians. The musicians want to be comics. That's an interesting.
It's. I find it to be true too. It's really an axiom, I think.
Right.
Yeah, so I could sing well enough
that you felt comfortable.
I felt comfortable.
Give a shot.
Dancing is another story.
I've seen you do that. I saw you do that in the Thanksgiving Day parade.
Oh man, I'm telling you, I got to say, how to succeed in business. Aside from being a great experience working with Dan Radcliffe and John Larroquette, and later on Nick Jonas. We got to do the Tonys, we got to do Letterman, we got to do the Today Show, and we all always did this one number, the 11 o'clock number, Brotherhood of Man, which is an enormous show-stopping number if it's done right. And Rob Ashford, the director, who's also a choreographer, did it right. And it was the acrobatics involved in this dance number was such that I needed oxygen when it was literally, it was just when it was over.
Done.
But I mean, it stopped the show.
That's the idea, right?
That's exactly right. I mean, one of those chill bump kind of numbers, you know? So.
Right. That's great, man. I mean, just that alone, I mean, and working with Matthew Broderick and Nathan Lane, and I mean, all the people that you've worked, it's just amazing, the trajectory of your career. It's amazing. And, and it doesn't stop there, because now we could talk about I wanted to talk about the television stuff too. You've played a defense attorney, Milton Schoenfeld, right? Law and Order.
Law and Order.
You had a recurring role in Ugly Betty, another on The Good Wife as a bond attorney. You play a lot of lawyers.
I do play a lot of lawyers, but the last thing that I did was the ultimate career goal of mine was to play a cop. Okay. And I actually got to play a police captain on the last season of Elementary.
Right, you played Bill Dwyer, right?
Was Captain Bill Dwyer.
That was with Lucy Liu.
Lucy Liu.
Wow,
Johnny Lee Miller.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, when I was on SVU, I got to be the Fonz's lawyer. I was Henry Winkler's lawyer.
Right.
When I did The Good Wife, I got to do scenes with, Juliana Margulies.
Right.
And in Elementary, I got to do scenes with Lucy Liu and Johnny Lee Miller and Aidan Quinn, who the story arc was Aidan Quinn had gotten shot at the very beginning of the season, and they weren't sure he was going to make it. And so I was the fill-in police captain at the precinct.
I see.
And in the last episode, Aidan Quinn came, my last episode, Aidan Quinn came back, and I had to hand the precinct back to him. And then something is revealed where I'm not exactly the nicest of guys.
Oh, I see.
And I kind of get my comeuppance. But it was just the greatest experience. Just so much fun. But again, you fall into it backwards.
I was going to say, now, how did the television thing come about?
SVU happened because the guy who designed the set for Tabletop is the art director for Law and Order SVU.
Okay.
And I guess some of the people he worked with came to see Tabletop.
Okay.
And then they asked their casting to bring me in to read. The first thing they had me read for was for some under 5 thing. I don't know if it was like a judge or something like that. And I didn't get it, and I was all depressed. And
now, under 5 meaning 5 episodes?
Under 5 lines.
Oh, I thought.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it was only going to be 1 episode.
Oh, I see.
But they kept bringing Milton back. Lucky for me, because when they brought me back to do Milton Schoenfeld, the defense attorney, it was like, okay. All right, so it was a much bigger part, many more scenes. I got to work with all the principals,
right?
Do scenes with all the principals, and then, out of that, they have something they can look at if they need your type. They go, okay, well, let's bring in the fat guy, and then you're in good shape, So,
oh man, it's amazing. You make it sound like it's classic show business, isn't it? Really,
it really is, because it's
just like. Right place, right time. Who do you know? But not to belittle it, you need the talent and the skills to back it up, because when those opportunities present themselves, you have to be ready to capitalize on them.
I remember reading an interview with Steve Martin. I think it was in Rolling Stone, where he had said, "You got to make sure that you have your bags packed if you're waiting for the bus."
Right.
And
it's a great way to put it.
The bus showed up and my bags were packed. So I was lucky enough to get on the bus.
Many times.
Yeah.
I mean, radio, television, stage. I mean,
but I'm also a prince to work with. They love me.
You're a beautiful human being.
I bring
donuts.
attest
to that. Our crew guy, Renee, he'll love to hear about the donuts. So I wanted to jump quickly into a couple of your current projects. So you're involved in something, a show called The Ruthless Spectator. You're also doing Rob Bartlett's Radio Comedy Hour podcast. So these seem sort of like a throwback almost to your stand-up and sketch comedy roots. Can you tell us a bit about these projects, how they came about?
Yeah, Ruthless actually came about first when Imus made it known that he was going to be retiring. I was looking for a plan B and thought that, what are my strengths? And realized that we could do something on the web. And we got together a little repertory company. And I got a writer, Andrew Smith, who is a great comic writer, was the head writer at SNL for a while. And he also wrote the screenplays for Who's That Girl and The Main
really?
Event. And so
cool.
he's really,
Solid.
and funny guy. Wrote a bunch of hysterical books. And Andrew Smith was the writer, and he also, served as an actor for some of the stuff. And we just wrote these sketches, and a lot of them were parodies of shows. We did our version of Say Yes to the Dress. It was like Don't Frown on the Gown. And we did, but it was for Siamese twins, so it was a hard fit, for the dress for them. And then I did a thing, Honey Boo Boo,
Right.
later on, as a grown up. I'll do drag at the drop of a dime if I'm going to get a laugh. So, I put the big curly wig on and the tracksuit and squirted cheese in a can into my mouth. And we did that for a while. We actually got a thing with Amazon Prime out of it. We got a 3-episode season called Ruthless Spectator Presents. And then the Ron Bartlett Radio Comedy Hour came about when after Imus left the air. The ABC, the radio station that we're at when he left, was looking to maintain connections with some of the people.
Okay.
Some of the people went on to take over the time slot, and a couple of us used the digital section of ABC to do a podcast. And I'd always wanted to do a throwback to the old radio shows.
Right.
Bob Hope and Jack Benny and Fibber McGee. I mean, the stuff that...
They're more like reviews, because I've heard it. It's more like a reviews.
Right? But then they also had like the Jack Benny show, there'd be a through line story, and then we'd have sound effects and whatever, but they would stand at microphones holding scripts in front of a live audience.
Right.
And they have a great performance space at ABC, the Hackensack Medical Center studio. I forget what the name of the studio is, but where they do live events. Usually musicians. At the time, they still Cumulus still owned Nash and PLJ, and so whenever there was somebody coming in to promote an album, they would come and they would do a live thing in front of fans. That they would broadcast on the net and whatnot. So we did a few episodes like that. I think 6 or 8 of them on a stage in front of a live audience. And then there was, I don't know, some kind of red tape or bad blood, or I think the guy who ran it really didn't like me, whatever. We weren't allowed to use the live studio anymore, so they stuck us in a radio studio, so we didn't have the visual component anymore, which is fine. We still did, the sketches and whatnot. Had some guests. We had Tony Danza come in. We had Michael Urie come in. We had some decent guests, and then they gave us an hour on Saturday nights. I guess one of the doctors who, the foot doctor who used to pay for the hour couldn't meet his bill, so they stuck us in. We did that for a little while, and then they came to me and they said, "Well, we can't have you do it anymore." I said, "Well, why?" He says, "Well, it's an insurance thing." I said, "What do you mean insurance thing?" I said, "Well, technically you have too many people. You have like 6 people in your cast, and we have to pay insurance." And I said, "Whoa!" I said, "They're my employees. I'm paying. You don't pay." Anyway, we couldn't do it. So now I do it from my kitchen, and it's me. And whenever I can, I'll get some tape, from the stuff that we used to do and play it back.
It's classic showbiz, man. Again, the ups, the downs. It's always it's just the way it is. But aside from the showbiz stuff, I wanted to also sort of finish up on. I wanted to talk a little bit about something that I also know is dear to your heart. You're involved in the Long Island Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. You've been very active with that charity. So why is that charity close to your heart? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
I was diagnosed with what they said at the time was ulcerative colitis. First, it was spasmodic colitis. They didn't really know a lot about it. And it's kind of an embarrassing disease to have because you can't be too far from a bathroom.
Right, I've heard that. Right.
And so, it kind of went unnoticed. You didn't really broadcast that you had it. And I lost, I lost a lot of weight. I lost a lot of time in my life. I lost, it made me leave college.
Wow.
And, eventually I had the surgeries that allow me to be healthy and get fat. And then unfortunately I passed it on to my son.
Oh, geez.
My middle son, Devin, who is my hero. And the Long Island chapter of the Crohn's Colitis Foundation was so instrumental in helping him get well and get to the point now where he's engaged and living with his girlfriend, and they're getting married next year and leading a regular life,
normal life.
When he missed most of high school.
Wow,
had to be tutored at home because he was so sick, and it's getting more and more prevalent now. I mean, everyone that I know, everyone I've ever met, either has a family member or knows somebody who's close to them who deals with the disease, and they're finding newer and newer stuff all the time. There's work with the genomes, and there are some medication protocols that are helping a lot, and I think they're going to wind up finding a cure. And so
that'd be great.
That's the reason why I got involved with them, and we do the walk every May, and it's
that's great, man.
Yeah, it's just you got to give back. You gotta. I mean, a man as lucky as myself,
right?
You gotta give back.
It's great. It's great to hear that you think that way. A lot of people, unfortunately, don't. But that's very cool, man, that you're doing that. And so I really appreciate you coming down here today and doing this.
Pleasure.
It's just really so great to have you, and it's so interesting to hear about your journey and all the stuff that you've done. So. Thank you again, and much continued success, sir. Big thanks to Rob Bartlett for visiting QC, hanging with us, and sharing his amazing story. To learn more about Rob and his work, visit his website, www.robshow.com. That's ROBSHOW.com. And to catch some fun bonus video of my conversation with Rob, not included in the podcast, visit us on the web at qptv.org/queenscreative. Well, that's it for this episode of QC. I hope you crazy kids dug it. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your pods, and please visit Queens Public Television on the web at qptv.org. QPTV can also be found on Facebook at facebook.com/Queens Public Television, and on Twitter and Instagram, we're at QPTV. Queens Creative was produced, recorded, and mixed by yours truly. As always, thanks for listening. I'm Mark Bacino. Till next time, see you, folks.